Hey everybody, today we've got some news that should not surprise anybody. We've got Mitch McConnell. He's not going to run for re-election next year. It's the first Senate Republican retirement, joining Gary Peters and Tina Smith on the other side. So today we're going to take a look at this race. We're going to see the candidates. We're going to see how competitive it might be. And we'll take a look at a couple of McConnell's past wins. And we'll see the last time the Democrats actually won a Senate seat in this deep red state. So let's get started here. This headline pretty much sums it up. Daniel Cameron launches 2026 Senate bid on heels of Mitch McConnell announcement. If I ended the video right here, I would say that it's likely Cameron is the next senator in Kentucky. But let's talk about it with a little bit more depth. First of all, this news should not surprise anybody. Mitch McConnell, his health has been questionable as of late, and he's already been in the Senate since 1985. He won his first term in 84. So 7 terms is quite the career. So given that he's in his 80s and we've recently seen him in a wheelchair, it seemed inevitable that McConnell was not going to run again. Even if he did run again, I think it would be likely McConnell would lose a primary. McConnell is pretty much the face of the Republican establishment over the past couple of decades. And given this is a red state, the Trump base is not going to be a big fan of seeing McConnell vote against some of Trump's nominees and potentially stonewall parts of his agenda. So I don't think there was any path forward for McConnell no matter what he did. His political era just passed him by. And now that he's up there in years, everybody cannot be Chuck Grassley and run and win into their 90s. So Republicans looking to go in a younger, more Trump-friendly direction. It makes sense. This is not at all a swing state. But given that it's going to be an open seat, is there any chance a rock star type of Democrat could come out of nowhere and make this seat competitive? Well, the short answer there is no, but let's take a look at this race on Wikipedia. So let's get into the candidates. First, we've got the Republicans. And we've got one declared candidate. That's going to be Daniel Cameron. Now, Cameron is pretty young. He's also been a McConnell protege. He's held statewide office as the Attorney General. And he seems like a nice enough guy with a personality that could win another race. But he does have one blemish on his resume. He took on incumbent Governor Andy Beshear in 23. That was going to be an uphill climb due to Beshear's popularity. So he did lose by 5 points. But governor is a completely different office. That's one where Democrats have had far more success over the decades than Republicans. So Cameron's name ID is going to be high. But since this state is so red, there's a deep GOP bench here. You can see all the list of potential candidates here. Some of them have ran for governor in the past, some of them are in the state legislature, and we've also got some here that have declined, including James Comer and Thomas Massey. So on the surface, you might think this could be a big primary brawl for that nomination, but I think Cameron's profile is high enough that he should be the clear frontrunner. We do have one poll here from back in December, and it did have Daniel Cameron in the lead with 37%, and it did have Daniel Cameron in the lead. He's in the 30s. Big chunk undecided though, still also in the 30s. Andy Barr is in second place. He's pulling in about 10 to 12%. So it's always unclear if one candidate is going to clear the field. But given the lean of the state, I would be surprised if nobody else jumps in to challenge Cameron. There's plenty of time for somebody to build a campaign and craft a unique message. And I don't think Cameron is going to expect to run unopposed, but we'll see what happens. So right now my money's on Cameron, but that's only one side of the coin. What about the Democrats? Well, one declared candidate right now, Pamela Stephenson. You can see she serves in the Kentucky House, and she already ran for AG in 23 and she took the loss. After that, there's not a whole lot of bench here for the Dems. The most high-profile candidate is going to be Governor Andy Beshear. Now we'll look more at Beshear in a couple minutes, but outside of Beshear, there's almost no chance the Dems have a flip in the seat. Even if it was with Beshear, I still think it's highly unlikely. A quick comparison I might draw is going to be in Maryland with Larry Hogan. He was a popular Republican governor in a deep blue state. He ran for the Senate and he lost by double digits. That's my best guess of what would happen here with Beshear. The Senate is totally different. That's where the partisan politics is going to be a lot higher. Governor gives the political minority a chance to win a race, and Beshear is a popular opposite party governor. But if he ran for the Senate, I would guess at first it might even show him competitive in some of the polling, just like with Hogan in Maryland. But as the election gets closer, the red lean of the state would kick in, and Beshear would probably lose by 10 to 15 points. Now every race is unique. Maybe that's not at all what happens, but this far out, that's the best guess. So Beshear is not going to run. He could always change his mind, but he's also young. He might be looking at a different office, maybe even president in 28. So the only declared candidate here, Pamela Stephenson. Let's take a quick glance at what she did when she ran for Attorney General in 23. Well, she lost by 16 points. She got 42% of the vote. That was at the same time Andy Beshear won re-election as governor. So just like with any state, no matter how dark red or blue it is, I think each major party should run a serious candidate. So this shows you how much of an uphill climb it might be here for the Dems. So before we look a little bit more at at Beshear and the last time the Dems were able to win a Senate seat here. Let's see how McConnell got started. For that, we've got to go back to 1984. So this was a completely different political era than today. And this was also during the Reagan landslide of '84. And McConnell won his first race here in a nail-biter. He got 49.9. He defeated incumbent Walter D. Huddleston, who got 49.5. And this is a total mix of red and blue counties. Not at all what we're familiar with today. So that put McConnell on the map. That was his first of 7 wins. That was a bruising battle and an impressive way to get started. Now let's go ahead 2 elections to 1996. Now this election is notable because McConnell wins his 3rd term, but he won it against future governor Steve Beshear. That's also the father of current governor Andy Beshear. And McConnell won this by double digits. And it again shows how the Senate is different than governor. And it even goes to show how you can take a loss in a significant statewide race and still come back later on and find success. So state politics are different than national politics. Steve Beshear, not a good fit for the Senate, but him and his son were good fits at the right time for governor. Now let's look at McConnell's last win in 2020. This is one where McConnell could have been potentially vulnerable in the primary, but it didn't happen. Then in the general election, McConnell was not popular. There were early talks about maybe him going down. Well, you can see here he had an absolute cakewalk to victory. He's up to 57.8, Amy McGrath at 38.2. And look at all these red counties. That shows you the political polarization we're familiar with today. And if you go down here and take a look at the polling for the general election, at the bottom here it starts off showing a competitive race. McConnell barely in the lead, tied, or even trailing in this one poll. But once the election rolled around, McConnell opened up a lead, and even these final polls underestimated him. I again think it's going to be similar to Maryland with Larry Hogan. That state and here in Kentucky are just way too partisan. Even if you put up the best candidate, it's unlikely you're going to be able to flip it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try, it just means you should have certain expectations. So when was the last time the Democrats actually won a Senate race in this state? Well, here it is in 1992. This was incumbent Wendell Ford. He won another term. He also previously was the governor, and this was a massive blowout. This was more than a 25-point win here for Ford. He's almost at 63%. Again, it's a totally different political era. The environment and the candidates are going to have an impact. But even with that said, this is a monster landslide here for the Dems. You might think with that kind of a margin, that can't be the last time they won a Senate seat here, but it is. Now, they have gotten extremely close a couple other times. If we go ahead to the next election in 1998, this was an open seat, and former Major League pitcher Jim Bunning won his first of 2 races. They were both extremely close. Here he's at about 49.8%. That's good enough for a 3.5-point win. So compared to 6 years earlier, 92, that was almost a 30-point swing. Back then in some states you saw significant movement like that. It's not something we see much of anymore. But Bunning faced an even more competitive race 6 years later in 2004. This one was just over a 1-point win here for Bunning. Even though he was the incumbent and George W. Bush won at the top of the ticket, this state still has a lot of ancestral ties to the Democrats. But Bunning was able to secure another 6 years. However, the Dems showed they could still be very competitive here. That was more than 20 years ago now, and we know this state has since become very, very red. Now let's spend a moment here talking about Andy Beshear. He's popular, he's the governor, he might run for president, but how did he get started? Well, he first ran for attorney general back in 2015, and he had an extremely tight victory. He's at 50.1. So if he were to lose that race, it's possible that would have put an end to his political career. But it's also possible he would have came back 4 years later anyway and ran for governor like he did. Now there's no way to not acknowledge that his dad was Steve Beshear, and I think it's reasonable to say that that alone might have been enough to put him over the top here. If he had a different last name, I could easily see him getting at least 0.2 of a point less and losing that race. But that was enough to get his foot in the door, and 4 years later he challenged incumbent governor Matt Bevin. Bevin is one of the few Republican governors in this state, but he was unpopular. Plus the national environment was not really that favorable for the GOP. And again, Beshear's last name, along with his non-aggressive personality, that gave him less than a 1-point win. So that was a big blow here for the Republicans, losing their incumbent governor. Then 4 years later, it was tough to imagine Beshear going down. But given the state is so red, there's a lot of Trump voters here. Republicans were not going to let this one slip away. So they put up their rising star attorney general, Daniel Cameron, but he still lost to Beshear by about 5 points, 52.5 to 47.5. That one was not a surprise. It would have been an upset for Beshear to go down. But Beshear is going to be term limited out of office for governor. And there's not really another path forward for Beshear in this state. It's sort of like Pete Buttigieg in Indiana. Although he didn't win anything statewide, his politics just don't line up with the state overall. So either you move to a different state, you try for a lower tier office, or you just retire from politics. So there's no doubt that Beshear would be the best candidate for the Dems to put forward. But I think they know how red this state is, and that Beshear would still be likely to lose. lose, so they don't want to burn out their own rising star, especially if he has ambitions for 28. So where does that leave us? Well, it's the end of the McConnell era, which we all pretty much saw coming. McConnell had an extensive career. A lot of people view him as a villain. His approval ratings are in the toilet, but he has been highly impactful. Him not holding a vote on Merrick Garland for the Supreme Court under Obama, and then having Trump come in and fill that seat with Neil Gorsuch, that's something the base should be a big fan of. But given his decades in office, resistance to the new direction of the Republican Party, and total lack of charisma, Republicans are looking for a fresh face and an upgrade in this solid red state. And at this point right now, it looks like it's going to be Daniel Cameron. Considering the state, he easily seems electable, and given his age, he could also serve for decades. This is just a seat the Dems are not going to focus on whatsoever. They've got to defend Michigan and Minnesota way before they even think about anything going on in Kentucky. But no matter who they run, I think the rating for me would be safe Republican. Andy Beshear is their best bet, but I think he has other intentions. So we'll see what happens, but this is a big changing of the guard in politics. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this U.S. Senate race in Kentucky? Do you think Cameron is going to be the nominee, or is he going to face a competitive primary? Do the Dems stand any chance here, even with Andy Beshear? And what do you think about McConnell's legacy? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.